Not one, not two. It's the show where you're told you're not you. It's nothing in the middle, nothing in the middle, nothing in the middle, nothing in the middle of nothing.
Hi, I'm Joey Lott, and welcome to the first episode of a show that I am calling Nothing in the Middle. At least for now, that's the working title, and we'll see what happens over time. For now, the format initially is going to be me sitting in front of the camera, talking to you, answering your questions. So thank you to everybody who sent in your questions. And just a note about the audio today. The audio is going to be on camera only, so it's not going to be necessarily the greatest audio, but I think it will be good enough for today. And so I've got a bunch of questions that were sent in, and let's just go ahead and jump right in. I'll read the questions and I'll offer some responses to them. I should tell you that I haven't even read most of these questions yet. I wanted to have just an off-the-cuff, spontaneous response. There were a few of them, however, that people demanded that I reply immediately to their email, so I've done that, but I'll also be replying on the camera today. So let's get started. The first question is, some teachers say that there is no self. Others tell you that there is only the self. Some instruct you to forget about yourself. Others advise to abide in yourself. What the fuck? Well, okay, I paraphrased a little bit. It just is what the ellipsis, question mark, but I think we knew what the person meant. So, right, it's very confusing. I had the same question, I have to admit. I would search and search, reading all of these different books, attending different meetings, listening to different videos and audios, and everybody seemed to say something different. Some people said no self, some people said it's all the self, some people said there's nothing, some people said it's all one. So how do you reconcile all of that? And in my experience, there is no need to try to reconcile that conceptually, because as long as you do that, that is the suffering. That really basically summarizes the suffering, is that it's the attempt to try to figure something out. Because ultimately it is not figure-outable, if that's a word. It's not a word, but you know what I mean. So there is no way that you will ever understand anything. At least I've never been able to understand anything. I thought I understood things, but all that I ever could think that I understood were just concepts that it was imagined that there was somebody holding on to those concepts, clinging to the concepts for dear life. And it turns out that freedom, at least in my experience, freedom is the complete abandonment of any attempt to try to understand any of it. And when I say that, what I mean is that it doesn't mean that anything has to change. So it's not that you can't ponder things or question things or be curious about things. Of course, that's all welcome, just like anything else. And certainly, I am curious about things. I ponder things. Why not? But there's no possibility of actually understanding it or figuring any of it out to really satisfy that desire for security, for finality, to actually have something that we can say, aha, this is it, this is real, this is the thing that I was looking for. And that's, we've assigned labels to that over time. We've called it God or Spirit or all these things that we come up with, all this stuff, source, the stuff that we capitalize, and or self, right? I mean, so like the questioner was saying, some teachers say it's all self, some say there is no self, so it's the self, which oftentimes gets capitalized, capital S, self, as if it was something that we could get or get rid of somehow. But finally, there is it's neither and it's both, and that's fine. And there's no need to do anything about it. Because it's seen that what is, and there's nobody who is seeing that. There's nobody who can get it or not get it. There's nobody who can be the self or get rid of the self. So there may be the appearance of self or no self, and that's fine. Because actually, those are both concepts. And, I use those concepts, plenty of people use those concepts as a pointer, a way to point to what is totally beyond understanding, which is just the simplicity of what is. It's not anything hidden. It's not complex. It's totally, utterly, perfectly simple. But it's also completely not understandable. There's no possibility of understanding it. And when I used to hear things like that, that would be very frustrating. What do you mean there's no way to understand it? Well, what the hell am I doing here listening to this video for? That would be my attitude. I would get very angry about it. And I know that I'm not the only one, because I've spoken with other people who have shared that with me. And it's understandable. It's very frustrating because we are so accustomed to understanding or thinking that we've understood, grasping hold of concepts and cobbling them together into bigger concepts that we think are these important, grand concepts that will give us something. So when somebody says there's no possibility of understanding, then it's very frustrating, because we can think, well, yeah, okay, so it's not understandable, then what are you, the person talking, what are you talking about? What's your authority? If nobody can understand it, then what is your authority to be speaking on this matter? Which is a really good point, actually, because I want to clarify that. I have no authority, just in case that was anybody had any confusion about that. I have no authority whatsoever, but there is a clarity that is obvious and evident when there's no clutter. There's no unnecessary grasping for stuff that does not exist. When that's seen, then it's possible to speak from that directly and to share that, which is not necessarily an authority, but it's a direct experience that can be communicated about and pointed to, so that others, for lack of a better way of putting it, can also see what is being pointed to, which is actually their own experience. It's not, or I say their own experience, but it's experience itself, or the experiencing, and that can be seen. So self, no self, abide in the self, get rid of the self. If you find the Buddha on the road, then kill him. What do you do? What do you do? And what I'm saying in response to that question is that it's actually an invitation not to do anything, or to do nothing. And that is the thing that we're usually, we want to avoid that at all costs, because we think that we think that we're after something that's going to give us freedom and fulfillment and peace, and we always imagine that it's just over there. So to really, truly give up, to abandon all hope, and to no longer make any effort to try to understand or reconcile anything, is a pretty radical departure from the momentum of seeking, of a lifetime of seeking in different guises. I'm not, I know there's this whole idea, the concept, there's a culture of spiritual seeking, which is there's nothing wrong with it, but it's bullshit. I mean, there is no spirituality. There's nothing to be found. But that's fine. It's also not different from all the other types of seeking. So there can be confusion sometimes when somebody says, give up the search, or the seeking is the suffering, because then people can misunderstand that and think, oh, okay, so I'm just gonna go to the bars and start womanizing again, or I'm gonna if I can't become enlightened, or if there's no spirituality, or if spiritual seeking is the problem, then I'll just go snort cocaine for the rest of my life or something. Or just watch TV or masturbate all the time or whatever. I mean, which is all fine. I mean, there's nothing morally wrong with any of that. But the point here is that it's all seeking, or it can be all in service of seeking. And this division between spiritual seeking and non-spiritual seeking is totally fabricated. I mean, it's just a made-up thing. Seeking is seeking is seeking, and you can sense it very easily when you just pause for a second and you recognize that there's a compulsion that's felt usually, I mean, it's always felt in the body, unless you have some very contorted conceptual framework from which you try to experience life. But it's usually going to be felt in the body. And it's a compulsion to get away from here, or to get to somewhere else, to get something else that we imagine is just out of reach, or that is hidden from us. But that is the seeking. So to give that up in all of its guises is where freedom is found. Because freedom is always here. It's not somewhere else. It's not hidden. Freedom is totally obvious, totally evident, and it's always present. It's right now. There's nothing else. There's nothing else other than freedom. But when we are believing in the lie that the compulsion tells, maybe that's not the most accurate statement, but we'll go with it. So the compulsion gives rise to the notion that there is something else, something to be had or gotten rid of, something hidden. And that is the suffering. So we don't need to get rid of the compulsion, but the possibility is to see through the compulsion, to recognize that there is nothing else, that this is it, finally, and that by doing nothing, to really, truly abandon the search right now, make no effort to get anywhere else, to see anything else, to do anything at all. Don't try to see some hidden spiritual reality. Don't try to get enlightened. Don't try to be free of suffering. Don't try to get rid of experience. Don't try to transform your feelings. Don't do any of that. Do nothing. And then the reality that is already obvious becomes more obvious somehow, strangely. And so the question of self or no self and all of that, trying to resolve or reconcile all of the concepts somehow, in my view, is a waste of time, and I don't suggest that anybody do it, because that is the suffering, actually. Trying to reconcile all of those concepts. Don't do it. Instead, just drop everything for 1 second, right now. And don't even try to do that, because if you try to do that, then you'll start questioning, am I doing it? Am I doing it correctly? So it's not about that. It's just a relief, finally, to not have to do anything. Whatever's happening is happening, and there's nobody who it's happening to. Nobody who can control it. Nobody who's going to do anything about it. Nobody who needs to get rid of it. Doesn't mean anything. Just let all of that go just for a second. And then there's the possibility of the clarity that this is it. And all of what those concepts are pointing to is just this. So self is pointing to this. No self is also pointing to this. But you can't reconcile them conceptually. They are resolved instantly already in the immediacy of this as it is. So hopefully that has resolved that. There's acorns falling on the roof here. So second question. There is the popular term sat-chit-ananda, implying that bliss should be a part of self-realization. But when I look into the present moment, what I find is different. Often there are unpleasant thoughts, physical discomfort, resistance, etc. Am I all wrong? This is a great question. Again, I think it's one of those things where the conceptual understanding can confuse us, because we then think that there's something else. So the sat-chit-ananda, it gets translated in different ways, but I think it's like being, consciousness, bliss. You can interpret it many different ways, but I think it's basically being, consciousness, bliss. And the confusion often is that bliss means something. That there's a specific manifestation or experience that is bliss. But actually, if we tell the truth about it, then what we're after, what we think we're looking for, is it couldn't be something opposed to something else. So right there, if we think that we're looking for bliss, which is opposed to non-bliss, and we imagine that that actually exists, that there is a bliss and a non-bliss, then guess what? That is not non-dual. By definition, that is dual. That's dualistic. That's bliss and non-bliss. So that can't be it. That can't be what we're looking for. What we're looking for, truly, is just this. Which can initially seem disappointing. And so like the question says, often there are unpleasant thoughts, physical discomfort, resistance, etc. And that's true. So the problem, as far as we can imagine that there is one, is different from what we've thought that it is. Usually we think that the thoughts or the physical discomfort or the resistance or whatever else is a sign of some sort of absence of bliss, or that is an indicator that something is wrong. Like the question says, am I all wrong? Should it always be, light pouring out from everything in a perfect sense of unity, and everything is always felt to be wonderful and enjoyable all the time? And if that's what you're looking for, then you see that is, again, that's the nature of suffering. That's the recipe for suffering, is to think that there is something else that can be had and hopefully maintained forever, or that there's something that can be gotten rid of. But it's just the understanding, it's just the interpretation that leads to the confusion. So we have these words, ananda, that we interpret as bliss or love or whatever, and then we think that we know what that means, and we have some memory of an experience that we think, oh, that's bliss, that's love, that's the peace of God, that's whatever. I need that, and I need to have that and maintain that forever. Because then finally I'll be enlightened and I'll be, I'll really be able to control everything then. But that's the misunderstanding, because what's your evidence that that experience that you're remembering is the actuality of bliss? It's just some experience that you've called bliss, or that you've called love, or that you've called enlightenment, or that you've called awakening, or you've called whatever you've called it. I mean, we can do this with anything. I mean, it doesn't have to be bliss or love. I mean, it could be hate or anger or frustration or disappointment or depression. I mean, the terms are useful in day-to-day conversation for communicating with one another, maybe. But if we believe them to be absolutely true, well, then we're lost. Because the actuality of what Ananda is pointing to, or what bliss is pointing to, is not some separate dualistic thing that comes and goes. It's not a state. It's the peace that allows all states to come and go as they do, completely out of control. And it's seen that none of it is happening to anyone, and that it's not even, really, when you tell the truth, it's not even happening. It's just this, and we have no idea what this is, and that's fine, because there's nobody to know. Nobody needs to know. That is bliss. It's not a particular state. The states come and go. There's physical discomfort, there are emotions, there's resistance. All of that comes and goes, as it always has, for no one. So it doesn't need to be gotten rid of. If it needed to be gotten rid of, then you're right back into the same old conceptual bullshit, which is, by the way, suffering. If you're still doing the same old thing, you're very likely to have the same old kinds of suffering. So what Ananda is really pointing to, again, is just this. Right now, for this second, I just invite you to just drop it all. Notice in the body where there's unnecessary tension, and just let it go just for a second. The objection will come up, well, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to let go. I'm not letting go. Okay, let that go. Who said letting go feels like anything in particular? That's just another concept. That's just like imagining that bliss is a particular type of experience, a particular state. But that's a lie. It's not true. So just let it go, just for an instant, just right now. Just to find out what happens if nothing is believed, if nothing is clinged to. See what that is. Find out. It's vulnerable, and it can be, it can seem to be frightening, but that again can be another thing, that it can be an objection, saying, no, I can't let go because it's scary. I might die. And the feelings around that can be very intense sometimes. Oh no, I'm going to die. And it, I mean, we can have some, we can kind of honor that it can be challenging because it can be very intense. The conditioning around that, years and years and years of that resistance and fear, the belief in concepts, and then, wanting reflexively to cling to and contract and tense up, to resist, to avoid. But I'm just saying, for 1 second, just 1 second. I mean, it can, even that can be very threatening, but less threatening perhaps. So just for a second, let go. And you just keep letting go. So just for this second, right now, let go. Whatever comes up, let go. It doesn't mean get rid of. It just means you don't need to do anything about it. You don't need to grab hold of it. It's not going to offer you any protection. You don't need any protection right now anyway, just for a second. just find out, just to experience what is this without any concept. So hopefully I've responded to that one adequately. A lot of people are talking of oneness, with a capital O, as an important experience, as the hallmark of enlightenment. Sounds rather mystical. I do not experience such extraordinary things. I simply do not tend to confuse my own body here and the tree's body over there. Are these guys living in a different world? I don't know. So when people talk about oneness as an important experience, there's so much just unnecessary bullshit that gets talked about. I would say anything that entices or lures one into a search for something else, or the belief that there's something hidden, is not useful, and I would recommend abandoning it right now, just to drop it. So if it's possible to experience what somebody talks about oneness, then it's possible right now to see what that is pointing to. But it's not going to be found by creating a conglomerate of all of these seemingly disparate pieces. It's not about the bodies, the tree's body and my body and the camera body and all of that, and trying to synthesize all of that into something called oneness. That will never work, because there's no end to the conceptual pieces. I mean, you could try as hard as you want, and you would never even approach finding and counting and assembling together all of the pieces. It's just not going to happen. So oneness is not found there. That's not what oneness is pointing to. Oneness is pointing to what is seen clearly when there's no attempt to find anything. When there's no attempt to search for anything that we believe to be hidden, when there's no attempt to assign meaning to anything, when there's it could be almost a sense of just falling back into oneself. It's not a thing that's going to be found, and oneness is misleading, to be honest with you. I'm not a big fan of the term. I may have used it on occasion, but I'm not a big fan of it, just because oneness implies that there's something there that can be touched upon or seen or experienced as a thing. It's like an enormous container that is oneness, but then it still has to have boundaries. Because if you just take a moment right now, and maybe just close your eyes, just for a moment, and if with your eyes closed and you don't look to any concepts, then what is here? Can you say for certain that there's any object here? And are there any boundaries to what's here? So there may be, we'll call them phenomena, that can occur: sensation, sound, smell. But are there any boundaries to any of that? And in fact, is there any space to be found? I mean, are you certain that there's a location for sensations? And if you say that there is, then how do you know that? Because if you don't turn to any concept for an answer, it gets tricky. You can't really know for certain that there's a location, that there's any here or there. I mean, even just with eyes closed, it's impossible, if you tell the truth, to know that non-conceptually that there's a, if you touch your finger to your knee, that that sensation is occurring somewhere. And you can do the same with your eyes open then. It's just easier initially to experience or to explore this with your eyes closed, but then you open your eyes and you can touch your finger to your knee and you can notice it's just out of habit. It's just conditioning that we assume that there's a location and that the finger and the knee are down there or over there or whatever. But actually, there's no evidence to support that. Just stuff happening. When you don't turn to a concept for an answer, then the seamlessness of what is becomes apparent. There's no way to separate it out. I mean, even when we separate senses and say, like I did earlier, sound or smell or the feeling, that those are arbitrary. They're completely conceptual. I mean, just try that out for yourself and just see, is there any way for you to distinguish between smell and sound if there's no concept? If you don't look to any concept for an answer, just purely experientially, is there a way to know that there's a real distinction to be made there? So, let me see if I responded to that. Yeah, I think I did. But you say it sounds rather mystical, this whole thing about oneness and it being a hallmark of enlightenment. And I would say yes, it does. It sounds very mystical. And mystical things can happen. Why not? I mean, but if you tell the truth, it's all pretty mystical, because there's no there's no substance that we can say, aha, this is it. This is really, really, really what it's all made of. This is the actuality of it, that I've isolated it and found it, and now I know what it all is. You can never know what it all is. So truly, non-conceptually, it's all mystical. But it's also all ordinary. There's no need to get all mystical about it. Who cares? I mean, you probably wouldn't have a lot of friends if you were just trying to be mystical all the time. Well, I mean, maybe. In some circles, you might. But it requires a lot of effort, I find, to try to be mystical all the time. And, even when you read accounts of the people who are said to be mystics, you don't really, I mean, the ones who we all kind of say, yeah, they're authentic. I mean, whatever that means, I don't know. But we seem to have kind of a consensus around certain people, and we say, yeah, those people were mystics, or are mystics. But when you read about them, they seem different, to be sure, but within their own context, let's say, totally ordinary. I mean, they're not running around being like, oh, look, I'm mystical. Because who cares? They certainly don't, because it requires too much effort to try to conjure up these things. I mean, who needs it? What is, without any effort, is enough. It's awesome. There's no need for something else, which is good news, because there isn't anything else. So, next question. Some people say that with enlightenment came the end of doubt. Does that mean that they finally figured it all out? That they really know who they are? What are the final answers the Buddha people, the enlightened people, come up with? Who am I really? So there's quite a few things to address in there. So they say, some people say that with enlightenment came the end of doubt, does that mean that they finally figured it all out? Well, I would say anybody who thinks they've figured it out is deluded. There's no possibility of figuring it out. There's nobody who can figure it out. The discovery is simply that nothing needs to be figured out and there's nobody who could figure it out. And then it's seen that this is peace, that this is freedom already, that there's no effort necessary. So if somebody says, oh, I figured it out and I'm enlightened now, well, I'd be highly suspicious about that. And who cares anyway about enlightenment? I mean, that's just, if you tell the truth, it's just a sort of like, it's like a way to one-up people. Like, look, I'm more special than you are because now I'm enlightened. I worked really hard and now I'm enlightened. And then somebody else says, well, I know you're enlightened, but you're just on level 1. I'm on level 7. I'm way more advanced than you. I've got all of these mystical powers. I mean, who cares? I think if you need to tell people that you're enlightened, then you might want to examine that. And anybody who's telling you that they're enlightened, I would question why you really are all that interested in what that person has to say, because if you're after something special, in my view, then that's a recipe for suffering. You don't need to be special. There's no need to be enlightened, and there's no need to have figured it all out. The compulsion to figure it all out is really the suffering. It's that sense that if I don't, I have to figure it out, and if I don't figure it out, then something bad. It's always something bad. We're not quite sure, but something bad, then I won't get into heaven and I'll suffer an eternal hellfire and whatever. I mean, we have these imaginations that conjure up all kinds of nonsense and then we believe it as if it was real, but there's nothing to figure out. There's nothing to understand. Does that mean that they really know who they are? And I don't know. I mean, again, if somebody says, I really know who I am, that's a little bit suspect to me. There's no, it's in my experience, the discovery of freedom is just this. There's nothing extraordinary. It's nothing, it's not about knowing who I am. It's about no longer trying to define who I am. Maybe that's not even quite right. It's just about no longer believing that there's anyone who could or should know who he or she is, and B, that there's no possibility of any definition whatsoever, because there are no boundaries. So, that's my response to that part. And then, what are the final answers that people come up with? And, there are lots and lots and lots of final answers. But again, I would say if somebody has final answers, that's suspect. Answers, what does that even mean? Where have you landed? What is your reference point so that you can say this is the answer? There is no reference point. There is no place to land. There's just what is, which has no boundaries, and it has there's no end to it, there's no beginning to it, there's nothing to be found. There's no possibility of an answer. And who am I really? I think I maybe have already addressed that, but who am I really is that is the search for something hidden. Who I am is just what's obvious. It cannot be known, it can't be understood, it cannot be bound or conceptualized. It's just what is. There's no one separate from what is. There's nobody who's thinking or observing or witnessing or experiencing any of it. It's just what is. So even the question, who am I really, is just what is. It's like a rhetorical question. There's no answer. It points to the resolution of the question, which is just this. The question itself is the answer. Who am I really? That's it. Okay, next question. Everybody is talking about consciousness. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people are talking about consciousness, or even pure consciousness. Yeah, I love that one. Cosmic consciousness, perhaps. I really have no idea what they are talking about. Yes, me either. All I find is experience, and that I'm obviously aware of that experience in a way I cannot explain. What is consciousness really? Am I doing this consciousness thing right? So let's just look at that in a few sections. So the first one I want to look at is all I find is experience, and that I'm obviously aware of that experience in a way I cannot explain. So I get that. Just for clarification, I would suggest that it would be worth taking a look to see if it's true. I mean, this is a bit of semantics here, but it's just worth looking at. Are you aware of that experience? Is that actually true? Is there someone who's aware of the experience? Is there even awareness of the experience, or is there just simply the experience? Is it possible that the experience and awareness are not separate? There's just awareness experience. And the reason I'm picking on that is just because subtly, when we start to do things like that, like speaking in that way, that I'm aware of the experience, starts to reinforce and I'm not suggesting that we should call out the language police, please. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not suggesting anybody should try to alter their language, but it's just useful sometimes to take a look at how we speak and what that may convey about the way that we're perceiving. So there is nobody who's experiencing. There's no experiencer, there's just the experience. Or we could say there's no experience either, there's just the experiencing. And so that would be something to take a look at. So what is consciousness really? And consciousness, if it starts out, everybody is talking about consciousness, or even pure consciousness. And I would say it's just another concept that it may be, in some context, it points to something that is true, whatever that means, but it points to something that is intimately, immediately, perfectly obvious. And if that pointing works, then great, but then there's no need to analyze it. If it doesn't, also no need to analyze it, because it's just a pointing. There is no such thing. There is no consciousness. That as a concept, it's just it's made up. There's no such thing. It's just a pointing. It's a pointing to what is immediately evident when there is a complete cessation of any attempt to get anything or figure anything out. And then, am I doing this consciousness thing right? And no, you're not. You can be assured, if you're doing it, you're not doing it right. But the good news is there's no possibility of doing it. So you don't have to agonize over that. There's nobody to do consciousness. There's no consciousness to be done. There's just what is. So we can simplify it completely. It's really, really, really easy when you just stop and don't try to understand anything at all. All of the objections will come up. Yeah, but I have to understand some things, and what about in physics class? Don't I have to understand things? And what about if my wife says something to me and she wants me to go to the grocery store and I'm just like, well, sorry, honey, but I'm not able to understand anymore. All these objections can come up, but they're bogus. You can just let them go for now. If we want to imagine there's a future, that's fine. Let the future take care of itself. I'm just suggesting right now, let it all go. Let it all be. Don't get rid of it. Just don't grab a hold of it. And see that all of the stuff that comes up, it doesn't need any attention. That there's nothing to figure out. There's no problem. There's no needed solution. There's nobody doing any of it. There's nobody who could resist any of it. There's just the letting go. And then all of what is being pointed to by any of these words, whether it's self or consciousness or awareness or whatever, becomes evident. Okay, so next one. It seems that some teachers and authors talk about interpretation or labeling as something fundamentally different from what is. But I guess this could create unnecessary tension, like, I have to stay away from any interpretation, otherwise I cannot see the simplicity of what is. And this is a great question. Yeah, I agree. That is what we tend to do, is we hear somebody speak about something and then we try to understand it, and then we try to fit it into a framework so that we can do something, because we're going to get enlightened, and it's going to be a 21-step process, and we've got it all laid out, and we're going to take those steps, and then we'll get enlightened. And so, when somebody says, that the interpretation or the labeling is different from what is, oftentimes, I'll say things like that too. That I'll talk about a conceptual layer that is unnecessary. And then, of course, we can hear that and say, oh, okay, I get it. I'm not supposed to. Now I've got to be the police of all of what's happening. I've got to make sure that no conceptual stuff happens. No thinking, no labeling, no interpretation, which misses the point entirely, because like anything, it's just pointing to what is. There's no way to get to what is. You can't take 21 steps to get to here. It's already here. It's already, no matter what, this is it. And as long as we're looking for something else, or trying to get to somewhere else, or trying to achieve something, then we will overlook what's already here. So there's no need to try to get rid of anything. The interpretation is, to whatever degree interpretation or labeling happens, it's possible just to see that it's happening, that it never was you doing it. There's nobody doing it. And there's no need to get rid of it. There's no need to do anything about it. But it's simply about beginning to recognize all of the... it's just a very, very subtle way in which all of what happens is imagined to be owned by someone or done by someone. So that can be seen through. That can just, right in this moment, it's possible to let it all go. It can be such a relief just for a second. I mean, like I said earlier, it can be terrifying because it leaves us vulnerable to all of the imagined threats. But at the same time, it can be a huge relief just for a second to let it all go. Wow, okay, I don't have to do all of that. And when you really just let it go just for a second, then it may become clear that there's no need to do anything, get rid of anything, or control anything. None of it was ever done by you. None of it will ever be done by you. That it's all always happening completely spontaneously, and that actually nothing's even happening. It's just this. And Yeah, so hopefully that has addressed that one. Next is, I find myself still repeatedly asking myself if this is really the end of the search, since my mind seems to want to continue searching. And I understand about the non-existence of a separate me, yet this me apparently continues to arise. Will this ever end? This belief in a separate self and this constant falling back into the mind. So there's quite a bit here, so I'll take it apart a little bit. I still find myself repeatedly asking myself if this is really the end of the search. So right there, you actually already have the recipe for suffering. It's the it seems like something different, but actually it's the same old thing. It's that looking for something else. It's the search. That is the search. So what you've just described, I find myself still repeatedly asking myself if this is really the end of the search. So that's the doubt or the objection that comes up. Is this really the end of the search? Well, what about this feeling? What about that? Maybe, what are they talking about? Is there something else? Am I overlooking something? Should I try harder? Am I not giving up enough? Should I give up more? Is it okay if I drink alcohol? Is it okay if I watch TV? Do I need to sleep enough? Do I still need to sleep? Should I be meditating? I mean, all this stuff comes up. I shouldn't be feeling that. If I'm enlightened, then I shouldn't be feeling that feeling, right? All of these things just keep coming up over and over and over until, but they may come up forever, but it's possible at some point to see it for what it is, which is just an impersonal happening. That's it. Doesn't mean anything. It has never meant anything. It's not yours, and you don't need to do anything about it. So the doubt or the objection, is this really the end of the search, is actually more of the search. When that's believed and followed, then there's still searching going on. So the invitation is just let it be. You don't need to do anything about it. Just don't go there. It lures you because it says, but there's something hidden. There's something else. There's something really good to be had. It's possible to avoid all of the bad stuff, all the unpleasant stuff. You just have to work harder. You have to search a little bit more. But don't believe it. Just remain still. Let it all go, just for this second. You can feel all that stuff happening. They're compulsions. It's always compulsions. The compulsions say, do this or else. Search or else. So the opportunity is just don't. Don't get involved. It's not worth it. And anyway, when you finally cease to get involved, then you recognize that you've never been involved and there's no possibility of being involved because all of this stuff is just happening. Or not happening, as it were. So the next part, since my mind seems to want to continue searching. So I would just say, take a look and see if you can find your mind. Your mind wants to continue searching. It's a way of, it's just a story. It's a story that we tell ourselves. My mind wants to continue searching. I don't want to search, but my mind does. So there's a duality right there. It's just, and it's totally imaginary. There's me and there's my mind. And they're at odds with one another. I just want to rest, but my mind, that evil bastard, just keeps searching. So see if it's actually true though. See if there actually is a mind. And see if there actually is me. I want to rest, but my mind keeps on searching. See if that's true. See if there's somebody who wants to rest and somebody who wants to search. There's not, by the way. But You know, you can take a look and see that for yourself. And I understand about the non-existence of a separate me. If I had $1 million for every time I hear that, I'd be a multi-millionaire. I get it. We all think we understand, but actually the understanding is the obstacle, sort of. It's the, there's no understanding possible. If you think you understand, I mean, I thought I understood a lot. I always thought I understood. I was one of those, you know, I would say, I understand intellectually, but, or I understand theoretically, but, and the thing is, you don't understand. I never understood, and I don't understand now. There's nothing to understand, and there's no one who can understand it. So, abandon the idea or the belief that you understand anything. It may be helpful. The less that you imagine you understand, the more possibility there is to actually meet what is as it is without any interpretation. Going back to the last question. So you don't understand, and that's a good thing. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's good not to understand. Yet, this me apparently continues to arise. So what is it that you're referring to when you say this me that continues to arise? Experience keeps on happening. I love the expression shit happens. It does. It always happens. Shit happens. And that's fine. But you can start to see that the injection of the one who is doing it or experiencing it or thinking it or creating it or having it or whatever, that is totally fictional. So when you say this me apparently continues to arise, just see that it's not true. I mean, just take a look. There's no, what's happening is that shit happens. So shit is happening, or non-shit, whatever. Stuff is happening, and then there's the inference of somebody to whom it's happening or who is doing it. But if you look, there's nothing there. There's nobody who's doing it, and it's not happening to anyone. So there is no me who's arising. That's a fiction. Will this ever end? This belief in a separate self and this constant falling back into the mind. Even there's quite a lot. So will it ever end? No, don't worry about things ending. That right there is it's like a projection of time and space, which is the playground for suffering. So don't go there. Will it ever end? Who cares? Don't get involved. Will it ever end? That's another objection. Will it ever end? I don't know if I can bear it. I can't handle it. I need it to end. Will it ever end? Just don't go there. See that all of that is just more shit happening. It's fine. Don't get involved. Don't touch it. Don't try to resolve it. Don't try to answer it. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to do anything about it. And specifically, will this belief in a separate self and this constant falling back into the mind ever end? So the belief in a separate self, who cares? Just see that it's just a belief. So a belief in a separate self, it's like the boogeyman. I mean, it seems really scary. Like, I used to be scared of monsters in the closet and stuff like that when I was a kid. And, it's like the terror is real. You can feel it. I mean, your stress hormones are pumping, and you're like, you feel like you're ready to fight or run like hell, but it's just there's nothing there. So the belief in a separate self is like, yeah, okay, so maybe it's like there was a closet and there was something in the closet, there was space in the closet, and then there was the projection of meaning and value and importance and all of that onto the space in the closet, or the boxes in the closet, or the clothes in the closet, or whatever. Same here. There's a belief in a separate self. I mean, that's a fiction. There's no belief and there's no belief in a separate self, but there's some phenomenon that occurs that you call a belief in a separate self. But actually, if you take a look, it's just some phenomenon. It has no meaning. It's maybe some sensations in the body. It's maybe a particular whatever. I mean, a particular neural process or something. But it's just something happening that is completely without meaning. And so there's no need to call it a belief in a separate self, because that lends credibility to the idea that there's something there that needs to be addressed, that you need to do something about. So it's like, if I believe that there's a monster in the closet, then I've got to figure out a strategy for how I get rid of the monster in the closet. What am I going to do? How do you get rid of monsters in the closet? It's quite a conundrum. But the same with the belief in a separate self. You just see, it's like, it's possible to see there's no monster in the closet, so I don't need to do anything about it. There's no belief in a separate self. That doesn't actually exist. There's just some phenomenon that has no meaning or value, and nothing needs to be done about it. Nobody needs to do it. So it's pretty simple. And the constant falling back into the mind, and the same thing with that. Just see that there's nobody falling back into the mind. There's no mind to fall back into. There is falling, perhaps we could say, I mean metaphorically, falling in the sense of complete insecurity, and that's usually what we're trying to avoid. We want to avoid the insecurity. There's a fly buzzing around there. There's no security to be found. That's why we're always trying to understand, trying to get some kind of security. We think that if we can understand it, then we can have it, we can hold it, we can be safe forever. But in actuality, there is no security. I mean, shit happens. It's like, here I am, and for all I know, alien spaceship will land here and crush me in the next 10 seconds. I mean, anything could happen. So, totally insecure. Why try to gain why try to gain security when there's no possibility of it? There's only total vulnerability, but that's okay, because it's vulnerability for no one. There's no one to have it. There's no one who's vulnerable. It's just vulnerability. And that becomes more and more obvious the more the vulnerability is simply welcomed and allowed. Because when we try to resist the vulnerability, then we imagine that there's something there that needs to be protected. But when the vulnerability is welcomed and allowed, which, by the way, the vulnerability doesn't need your permission. I mean, it just is. But it's a relief to stop struggling against what is. And so the invitation to welcome and allow is just give up the struggle. Then it can be seen that there's nothing to defend anyway. There's no problem. Vulnerability is just vulnerability. It's not my vulnerability. There's no one here to be vulnerable. It's just vulnerability. So, next one. I have listened and read many non-duality authors and speakers over many years. I wonder if maybe the truth is only true for these specific individuals, but not really of value to others, because there's really nothing to learn, and it will or may never be true for me. Could be, yeah. I mean, in a sense, there is no truth, right? As soon as we think that there's truth, then we've created a concept, and it's something else, something hidden, something that we need to strive for, something in the future, something over there. We need to work for it, or we need to get rid of stuff that's in the way, need to get rid of all the obstacles. So truth then becomes a division, separation that creates the illusion of duality. And in that sense, there actually is no truth, and the pursuit of that truth, of any truth, will it will be synonymous with suffering. So in that sense, there is no truth, and you'd be best off not searching for truth. And when somebody speaks of the truth, you can be assured, I think, that that truth is not like you say, that it's of no value to you. Definitely of no value to you. Don't look for truth. It will not be of any value to you. If anything that you can look for will not be of value to you. And it may never be true for you. It's true. It's true that it may never be true for you. So, in my view, the invitation, when realizing something like this, which is that's a great realization. It's an awesome realization that there's what we imagine is truth is not truth. That holds no value for me, and that it will never give me what I want. That's huge. That's just like a really great realization. But then what can happen is then we can kind of get maybe cynical and say, well, so now I'm gonna, like, fuck that, and now I'm gonna just go watch TV and smoke cigarettes, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with watching TV or smoking cigarettes, but it's possible that those activities that we may, that they're sort of like these reactive activities that we may do are more, it's just more searching in a different guise. So, and there's nothing wrong with that either. There's nothing wrong with searching. It's just that it's very unpleasant. So, if you are truly desirous of peace, then my suggestion is don't look for truth, but don't. And I'm not saying that the person who sent in this question is somebody who would go to that cynical place. I'm just saying, if you really, to anybody who's watching this, if you really want peace, then don't try to make it into a black and white thing. There's truth or there's not. Fuck it, I'm going to go watch TV and smoke cigarettes. Instead, just let go. Don't try to figure it out. Don't try to get away from anything. Welcome it all. And so smoking cigarettes and watching TV, fine. It's fine. But while smoking cigarettes and watching TV, it's just possible to notice, is there suffering happening? I'm not even sure I like the tone of that, because then that implies that there's some value in like being kind of vigilant, which I don't think there is, but I'm just offering that for anybody who is looking for anything at all, stop looking for something and just see how this, as it is, has been, it's always enough, but it's what we imagine that it's not. We tell stories about it, and then we try to escape from it or get to something else or improve it or do something. Always putting off into the future the discovery of peace. So then, I got a few more questions here. Something that I still grapple with is the idea of free will. When we are in full acceptance, can one assume that we are just experiencing what our soul wants to experience without the management issues of the mind, ego? Or do we still have choices on a practical level? Or do we just think that we have made choices, but ultimately that's just an illusion? So there's quite a lot in there. So when we are in full acceptance, can one assume that we are just experiencing what our soul wants to experience? And I'd say that's too complicated. Let's just get rid of the unnecessary stuff. So full acceptance, could take issue with that, but let's just jump over that one. That the main thing that really jumps out at me here is that experiencing what our soul wants to experience. This is a very popular conceptual framework. The idea that there's a soul and there's a the higher self and the lower self and the all these different pieces, and we talk about that a lot. We say, well, a part of me wants this and a part of me wants that. So I would just suggest take a look and see if it's possible to actually find the soul non-conceptually. That's number one. Number two is why does there have to be any? Why does what is have to be what anyone wants? So even that what is what someone wants, whether it's me or my soul, higher self, lower self, God, the devil, Krishna, Buddha, on and on. Why does somebody have to want that or will that? Why does there have to be any separation at all? Because if you just drop all of the concepts just for a moment, let it all be, is there actually any separation to be found? Non-conceptually. Conceptually, you can come up with lots of separation. I can say, well, I'm here and the camera's there, there's separation. But non-conceptually, there's no separation. So conceptually, I can say, well, there's a God and this is God's will. But it's unnecessary to do that because, it's not helpful because it maintains a fictional separation in a framework of time and space in which everything is happening. So then I want to know, well, who am I and what's my role, and do I have free will? Do I have choice? Is it choiceless? Is it scary? Is it not scary? Does God's will align with my will? Would God's will have, scary things in it, bad things? Might I get tortured because it's God's will? And then, we can go off into all these other really horrific things of, like utilizing that concept in order to, as a justification for all kinds of horrendous behaviors, which we've seen. That happens, right? We know that. So I'd say why even bother with that? There's no evidence of a soul, there's no evidence of God, there's no evidence of time or space, there's no evidence of desire even, or will. There's in actual experience directly, there's only what is, just this right now. Can't even say that anything's happening because it's so immediate. It's just this. And it's not anyone's will. It's not because somebody wants it. Want, if we're to say that there is such a thing as want or desire, that is simply what is. It's just a movement. It's just this. Not separate from this. It's not happening to somebody. It's not somebody's. It's not my will or my desire or my want. Just what is. So then, without the management issues of the mind ego. So again, very popular way of conceptualizing things, the mind or the ego. But again, I just say, take a look. Is there a mind or an ego that can be found? Non-conceptually. As far as I can see, mind and ego are just concepts. That's it. So, can concepts do anything? Can concepts manage? No. So there's nothing there to manage anything, and we can start to see that trying to puzzle all of this out. The management issues of the mind and the ego, and then what do I do about the mind and the ego? How do I do battle with them? How do I win? How do I, there's the good me, the soul, the higher self, the whatever, and we all do this, and I'm not picking on. I promise you, I'm not picking on anybody here. This is, we all have done this. And we do it in very subtle ways sometimes, and we can imagine that there's something else, that there's a greater hidden will of some sort. And that's a key, is anything that we think is hidden is a really good indicator that it's just fiction. There's nothing hidden. It's all obvious. Why do you imagine that there's something hidden? I mean, I know people talk about it, but people people tell a lot of stories. Three Goldilocks and three bears. Goldilocks and three bears. Do we imagine really that that's real? Do we go off searching for the hidden bears, the anthropomorphic bears who live in a house and make porridge? No, because we know it's not real. It's just a story. It's not something that's hidden. And so it's the same with all of it. They're just stories, and we don't need to believe in them, and we don't need to believe that there's anything hidden. It's just this, which is, when we open to that, or when we discover the truth of that, it's awesome. Conceptually we can dismiss what is, because we say, it's just this. Like, I know this is not enough, this is boring, this is painful, this is not, whatever. But ironically, or at least paradoxically, we can say that the abandonment of all of the search for something else reveals that, this as it is infinite. I had no idea. I still have no idea. There's no possibility of having an idea about this. It's infinite. And it's awesome. So we can just abandon all those concepts. So then the question is, do we still have choices on a practical level? Sure, why not? As I often say, when it seems like you have a choice, then I would recommend, to anybody who's interested in peace, I would just say exercise the choice, just one choice. Exercise the one choice to let go, no matter what, because that is how then the peace, which is already present, becomes more evident or more obvious, clearer, maybe. Or not. I mean, you don't need to. It's not better to do that. I'm just saying that it seems to me that what you want is peace, then stop looking for it somewhere else. This is it right now. This is peace. And so if that's not obvious and it seems that there's a choice, then I just say exercise that choice by making absolutely no effort to get anywhere, do anything, achieve anything, understand anything, figure anything out, or gain any kind of security whatsoever. Just let it all go. Or do we just think that we have made choices, but ultimately that's just an illusion? And that's sort of the other side of it. Because so it does seem that there's choice, but then as soon as that choice is exercised to let it all go, then it may become apparent that there's no choice. But this whole choice, no choice thing, it's not, it's just a paradox that's never going to be resolved. Well, never going to be resolved. You can't resolve it by trying to understand it, trying to figure it out. But like everything else, when it's all let go, when there's no effort or energy put into attempting to figure it out or get somewhere or get rid of anything or protect or defend, then it becomes apparent that it already always was perfectly resolved. Not conceptually, but just as it is. By its own nature, it's already resolved. Because there never was a division, there never was any separation choice and no choice is the same, pointing to what is. Next question. Do I need to have attention to feel non-duality or being lost in thought is the same thing? Life is life no matter how you slice it. Am I correct? So there was no punctuation in this one, so I think I may have read it wrong. So I'll try that again. Do I need to have attention to feel non-duality? Or is being lost in thought the same thing? Life is life no matter how you slice it. Am I correct? So obviously a few pieces there. Do I need to have attention to feel non-duality? And you cannot not feel non-duality. Whatever is felt is non-duality. There's only non-duality. There's only this. It's not a particular experience or a particular category of experience, not a particular state. It's not something that you remember. It's not better or worse or up or down or anything else. It's just this. And so, do I need to have attention to feel non-duality? I think the question, I believe, the question means, do I need to utilize attention in a particular way in order to feel non-duality? And I would say, no. Yes and no. Because ultimately there's no, it becomes apparent that there is no attention, and there's nothing else that could be described as duality. There's only non-duality. There's only this. Attention, like everything else that we talk about, is just a concept that's pointing to something. There is the appearance of what seems to be a shift or a movement that we can describe as attention. Actually, finally, when there's just no attempt to understand or figure out anything, then it's seen that even that is just a fabrication. There's no attention, there's no shift, there's only just this, which cannot be compared to anything else because this is it. But, like the choice thing, as long as it seems that there is attention, and it seems that there is some ability to choose attention or control attention, or to shift attention, then I would say, as long as that is the case, and as long as you are desirous of peace, then it's sensible, in my view, to utilize that by shifting attention away from the thoughts and the story that's trying to solve the problem. You'll notice that suffering is always about trying to solve a problem, trying to figure it out, trying to understand it, trying to correct it, trying to protect, trying to defend. So my suggestion is, as long as it seems that there's the possibility of controlling attention, or that there is such a thing as attention, then shift attention from all of that attempt to solve a problem to simply noticing what is maybe felt to be nearer than any of that. Just the sensations in the body. I find that to be a very useful practice, let's say, that can help to reveal it gets tricky, but it can help to reveal the simplicity of what is, that there's no need to put any effort into anything. So you can just shift the attention from all of that story and drama and attempt to solve everything. Just notice the sensations in the body. And wherever there is any kind of unnecessary tension, just soften. Don't force anything, don't get rid of anything, just soften, allow everything to soften and let go. And that can be useful. But you say, do you need to have attention to feel non-duality? Ultimately, no. But as far as practice goes, I would say that that practice that I just described can be potentially helpful as a pointer. So then, or is being lost in thought the same thing? And isn't, on the one hand, no, it's not the same thing. It's obviously not the same thing in the same way that, being, like scalded with hot coffee is not the same thing as, drinking cool lemonade. I mean, they're different. And like some things are more pleasant than others. Some things are less pleasant than others. So they're not the same thing, but each of them has equally no meaning or value. We can say that. So there's no moral value in either one of them. It's not that. The practice that I described of shifting attention to just noticing sensations is in any way better than what you're describing as being lost in thought. It's not. And the discovery can be that what you describe as lost in thought is simply an impersonal happening like everything else. So in actuality, that same phenomenon may occur, let's say, in my experience. The language is funny there, but that can happen, but it's not happening to anyone, for anyone, or by anyone, and it has no meaning. It's not good or bad. It doesn't indicate enlightenment or unenlightenment. It doesn't mean that good things will happen or bad things will happen. So it's totally irrelevant. So life is life no matter how you slice it. Am I correct? Well, sure, except I would say there's no possibility of slicing it. There's just aliveness. And there's nobody who can see that or control that or do anything about it. It's just aliveness. Hopefully that was helpful there. Next question. We've only got two more. What's the persisting sense of an I that remains even when I know that the I doesn't exist as something separate from what is? And this is a great question. Because I get this a lot. So the sense of an I is not that we just talk about that. Say a sense of an I. That's just a concept. The same as any other concept. We've talked about some other examples of that during this video. So it's just a concept that's been applied to a particular type of category of experience. That's it. So it's actually just an impersonal happening. Some sensations in the body, let's say, contractions in the head or in the gut, whatever. And we apply a label to that and we say that's a sense of an I. And then, because we've read and heard all kinds of things, we imagine that that's a problem. Oh no, the sense of an I. Got it? That means something bad. That means that I'm not enlightened yet. I've got to search harder to become enlightened. I have to get rid of the sense of an I. But there's no evidence that that's true. I mean, that is just made up. It's a fiction. And when we believe that, then we can seemingly set about trying to remedy that, which is the suffering. So I would say, drop it. When this, what you call a sense of an I, comes up or appears, then soften. let go. You'll notice the compulsion, that maybe a contraction is like the resistance of, oh no, not that. That means something. I have to get rid of it. Or the doubt, oh, well, does that mean that I'm not enlightened? Is there more to get, more to attain? Whatever happens there, I would suggest just soften and let go. Notice the compulsion and don't do anything about it. And that can be scary sometimes, like we've talked about, but there's no need to do anything about it. So don't get involved. So the rest of it is, when I know that the I doesn't exist as something separate from what is. And I would just add there that if you know that the I doesn't exist as something separate from what is, then let that go too. Because that you're creating a conflict there. I mean, what I'm hearing is there's a conflict between the concepts. You know, there's the concept of, oh, this experience signifies a sense of I. Even though that's not, there's no evidence that that's true. It's just a concept. This feeling or whatever means there's a sense of I. And then in conflict with that is the sense, or the concept that I know that the I doesn't exist as something separate from what is. But that's just a concept too. And those two concepts then play off of one another as a, you know, something to resolve. But there's no need to resolve it. Don't try to understand it. Just let go. Whatever happens, just let go. There's nothing to get. There's nothing to solve. And then one more. Our interests in political, social issues, or motivation to act against social injustice, going to change if one sees the simplicity of what is? Actually, there's quite a few parts to this, so I'll address that one first. No, yes and no. I mean, things will be what they will be. I mean, there's no rule about anything. So, what I have found for myself is that some things fall away and others don't. Tends to be more falls away than doesn't, but I don't know that that's true actually. Some things, just in my own experience, some things it becomes clear that it's not important. It's just not important. It used to seem important and now it doesn't. Other things, there's a greater confidence, let's say. It's not a confidence of you know, I'm right and you're wrong. It's just a confidence in this is what is. That we could say what is in a way of speaking. We could say that that's my sensibility about this issue, and it could be what we could call a political or an activist issue. You know, that's like, there's just a confidence that there's no longer a resistance or an internal, what we could call an internal conflict or struggle about that. There's no doubt about it. It's just what is. So there's a clarity and an ease with which that plays out. But at the same time there's just in my own experience there's less sense of trying to convert anybody. You know, I mean, it used to be that my religion was like anybody. It was my belief system. I had all kinds of beliefs, and so I felt that it was important to convert other people to my religion. And now I don't care. I don't care if other people convert to my religion or not. I gave up religion. You know, I mean, like these videos I share with people who are interested, I don't care. I'm not offering something for you to believe. You know, I mean, hopefully you don't believe anything that I say. I don't think that would be helpful. Of course, I can't prevent that from happening. If some people will believe, and that's what is. That's fine. But from just speaking from my own experience, there's no need to convert people. So it takes a lot of the fire out of the activism. And for somebody who's committed to activism as a part of their identity, then that may seem scary or threatening. A lot of my own politics are, what you might call, I guess you'd call them sort of radical, and they'd probably be categorized as anarchist. I don't necessarily believe that that's true, but I think as far as the categories go, I think that's generally how people would view my politics. But it used to seem to me that was really important. Like it mattered, and now it's clear that there's no possibility of knowing that, because because the context for everything is totally infinite and unbounded. So before, we'll say, I mean the language is trickier, but this is just hopefully this is clear. Before, there used to be a sense the context was smaller. It was a narrow context. So within a narrow context, there can be truths. You can say, like that. If your context is a small, let's say like your context is a town, then within that context, for anybody who enjoys being alive, it's very, very clearly bad that the town would be bombed, right? I mean, there's just, there's no gray area there for anybody who wants to be alive, who's in the town being bombed is really bad. But when you open that context up, so that there's no boundaries whatsoever, then it's all a gray area. And that can be very uncomfortable for many people. I would suggest if what you want is comfort, definitely don't listen to me, because I can't offer any comfort. I'm pointing to something that's totally the opposite. It's the welcoming of insecurity and the possibility of discomfort. And but the discovery of peace, in my own experiences, the willingness to welcome discomfort and the realization that that life isn't black and white, it's gray, or multi-colored, I guess. I don't know. I mean, it's everything and nothing. So that's just my own experience in regard to that. This is the next part of the question. Is it that any protest is misguided if you aren't free? No, I don't think that's true. I think what is. There's no one to be free or not free anyway. Because that question sort of implies that there's a moral, some moral value in freedom for an individual, that one should strive for that. I don't see that as true. I don't see that I don't see there's any moral value in any of it, and certainly not in an individual striving for freedom, because there is no individual freedom to be had. And certainly striving for individual freedom, in my own experience at least, is the problem, as far as there is a problem. I mean, that causes one to overlook the freedom that is inherently already what is. So I don't see that protest is misguided if you aren't free. I don't see that there's anyone who is not free or who could become free, nor and I don't see any problem with protest inherently. I mean, most protest is probably ineffective. But so what? I mean, I say ineffective, and it depends what the aim is. If the aim is just to protest, then it's perfectly effective. So yeah, I don't see that there's any problem with that. Not that anybody was asking my permission, but awakened ones is in the next part of the question. Awakened ones don't act unless they are not directly affected by certain social problems. That's a question. So the question, I guess, would be, is it true that awakened ones don't act unless they are not directly affected by certain social problems? And I don't see that that's true either. If we're to imagine that there's such a thing as an awakened one, which I'm not sure that's useful, but we'll run with it. Let's just say somebody who knows the somebody who knows that who makes no effort to understand or control, then they act just as everybody else does, completely spontaneously, without any volition. So there's and for somebody who knows that there's no boundaries, then the idea that they could be directly affected by certain social problems no longer makes any sense. That just doesn't make sense. So everybody is acting spontaneously without volition, and that is true of everybody. That doesn't change if somebody discovers or realizes the unbounded nature of reality and the seamless nature of reality. Then all that happens is that it becomes clear that there is no volition, and that that all actions are spontaneous. So what happens then is it just removes any false notion that there's any moral obligation, or that to act in a particular way, that any of it means anything, or that there's any possibility of knowing anything for certain, because the context is totally boundless at that point. So again, it's like if you have this small context, then it's easier to know right and wrong, good and bad. But then when that context is totally unbounded, there's no way to know. And I think that's maybe what the question is asking, so that's my response to it. So that, we've wrapped up the questions that were asked for this episode, and hopefully, if this has been helpful, then we'll do another one. So please feel free to send me your questions, and if you wish to, I will. You can send them to me by email. My email is joeylott@gmail.com. JOEYLOTT@gmail.com. Or you can send them to me through Facebook if you are connected to me on Facebook. Or you can, if you want to post it on a comment on my blog, you can do that. My website is www.joeylott.com. JOEYLOTT.com.